Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. New Year's Eve, 1999, by She Makes Mistakes. When I was 13, the dawning of a new millennium took place on New Year's Eve. While people were fearing the worst with the Y2K bug or out partying and drinking, I was home alone. In 1996, my parents had split up, and from there they were divorced, and my mother and I moved across the country from Oregon to Tennessee with her best friend. On the eve of the year 2000, I was home alone and my mother was currently out of state. Now, this didn't worry me, as this was not the first time. I often came home to find a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone to Florida for a few days, and that there were groceries in the fridge. Since the divorce, she was regularly leaving me alone for long periods of time to go to Florida. We lived on a relatively quiet road surrounded by trees and set a few miles out of town, and I knew most of the people, if not by name, then by face enough to wave and small chat with, and had never before been given a reason to be afraid of being alone. On the night in question, I was staying up late watching television. I remember I was watching the movie His Bodyguard on USA Channel. It had most of the lights on in the house, not because I was afraid, but because at 13 I wasn't concerned with electric bills or saving the environment. I felt completely safe and protected within my little bubble of home. As I was watching the movie, I kept hearing these weird sounds outside, but I remember thinking it was probably the neighbors. Though they weren't extremely close, a couple of them were having a party or people over for the holiday. About halfway into my movie, however, the power in the house suddenly went dead. I sat on the couch for a minute, just sort of in a panicked daze, because it was near midnight and pitch black. I remember thinking the power must have gone out and that it would just come back on, so I decided to sit on the couch with my blanket and wait. A few minutes passed by when I heard a noise in the kitchen where the back door is. My heart started racing in my chest because I thought it sounded like the back door being shut. The back door sits just off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen, which leads directly into the living room where I was currently sitting. A few seconds passed after I heard the sound, and I was straining my ears to pick up anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Every noise suddenly felt magnified. When footsteps sounded on the floor, I immediately slithered off the couch, onto all fours, crawled around the ottoman, and started as slowly and as quietly as I could make my way toward the space between the love seat and the couch. I knew I could fit under the side table and be completely hidden by the dark and the ottoman from playing hide-and-go-seek in the dark many, many times with friends during sleepovers. I was nearly there when the footsteps became more apparent. I knew from the sound of them that whoever it was making their way through the kitchen now toward the living room. They weren't hurried or anything, it was just like they were moving around in the kitchen. I glanced up from where I was crouched on the floor, and to my horror there was a dark silhouette standing in the archway between the two rooms. To my credit, I didn't scream, but I did panic. I immediately stood to my feet from my hiding spot and ran down the hallway, and I believe the only reason I wasn't overcome was because the person chasing me had to get around the ottoman in the dark to follow me. I did what all children do when they're afraid, and I bypassed the front door, the guest bedroom, the bathroom, and ran to the farthest door down the hallway, my room. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have been able to get the front door unlocked and open in time, as it was right off the side of the couch. When I was 10, I got a bird for my birthday. He was a blue-fronted Amazon, and I named him Boo because it was October and close to Halloween. Boo had a large metal cage, and it was kept in my room despite the fact that Boo, like me, pretty much had the run of the house whenever he wanted. This information will become relevant later in the story. As I ran into my room, I slammed the door shut and locked it. However, the lock was simply one of those little turn knobs you can easily pop with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when the person on the other side knocked on it. I have no idea why they knocked, to mock me or scare me, but I knew in my heart that my little lock was not going to keep whoever was on the outside of the room out. It didn't keep my mother out when we were arguing, and it wouldn't stand up to brute force. I was panicking and on the verge of tears when the person started laughing. It was low and quiet, and because of that, it was even more frightening. It wasn't like manic laughter, but as if they were genuinely amused. It was the laughter that really frightened me, and I started heavily, hysterically crying and looking around my room to figure out what I could do. That was when I realized Boo's cage would fit almost perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. The cage moved quietly on my carpeted floor, but as I pushed it into place, it scraped against the door and alerted whoever it was on the other side that I was trying to barricade myself in, because whoever that was suddenly threw themselves at my door, and you could hear the sound of the wood splintering and the door handle being twisted violently. Boo, who had been stirred awake by the movement, began literally screaming and flapping his wings. I may have been screaming along with him, but honestly, I don't remember screaming. I just remember being extremely scared. Terrified, I crawled under my bed and couch. It's a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom. And I waited. Several minutes passed, and the person eventually stopped attacking my door. Boo continued screaming after he had stopped, and though being under my bed gave me no feelings of being secure, I didn't come out from under it because I simply had nowhere else to go. I thought about trying to go out the window, but I was afraid he might expect it and therefore be waiting for me on the other side. And it was also several feet off the ground, as the house was built on a raised foundation. I remember laying under my bed, terrified for what felt like hours. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke the next morning to daylight. The fear of what happened came back to me as soon as I registered where I was and why, and scared that whoever had been in my house might still be there. I decided to crawl out the window and run to a neighbor since it was daylight outside, and therefore I felt less afraid. Crawling out a window is a lot harder than it looks, and I did it less than gracefully, as I was not and still am not the most coordinated human being. Once I was back on my feet, however, I carefully made my way around the house, and that's when I noticed that the back door was wide open. Scared but feeling braver now that I was outside and that it was morning instead of pitch-black night, I walked up the back steps and peered inside. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, no terrifying man leering at me, basically, I decided to go inside. Looking back, I cringe on how stupid this could have turned out, and that I wish I could have told my younger self to make the smarter move and just go get help. Thankfully, no one was inside my house. I did a terrifying, heart-pounding room-to-room check, looking in closets and under beds, behind the couch, anywhere I thought even a small child might be able to fit. I even popped the lock on my mom's bedroom so I could check it, and then relocked it afterwards. When I was positive there was no one there, I went back to lock the back door, and I had left it open in case I needed to escape, and noticed that the breaker box on the opposite wall was open. The main switch had been pulled. I flipped it back on, locked both locks on the back door, checked all the windows and front door, and then called my mom, where I once again broke down crying hysterically. She called one of her coworkers who came over and stayed the entire day with me as she drove back. My mom still took random trips to Florida after that, but I always went with her from then on forward. So, terrifying, laughing, crazy person that broke into my house on New Year's Eve, please, let's never meet again. And I sincerely hope no other young girl has met you either. I don't know if you were just some drunk visitor or neighbor, but you terrorized me that night. I was afraid of being alone when my mom was working, and to this day I still get scared when I'm home alone. I overthink what I would do if someone came inside and where I would hide. When my cats make noise out of nowhere, I immediately investigate for fear it's someone trying to get in. P.S. My mom had to help lift me back into my bedroom window so I could move Boo's cage out of the corner between my bedroom door and closet and get back in. We never had another incident at the house, and we moved into town to another apartment a year later. Bad New Year's Party, submitted by Not That Jenny Jones. One of the worst nights of my life came on New Year's Eve, and I could have avoided all of it had I not been a team player. That year, the owner of the company I worked for decided to have the company party on New Year's Eve. I mean, seriously, who does that? He did. At first, I thought it was a shitty idea, but others told me that the company parties were always ragers and that everyone brought their significant others. However, most holiday parties were before Christmas, so I could see how that would be fun. I was 26, new to the company, and used to going out with my boyfriend and friends to ring in the new year. But that year, my boyfriend and I had broken up, and I was trying to impress people at work and thought, what the hell, I'll go and see if it sucks. I could just catch up with my friends elsewhere later. I did work for a pretty cool place with a large contingent of people my age, so I decided to make the best of it and just have some fun. It was being held at a place downtown, not far from my city's ball drop and other night spots. So I got dressed up and then went to my work friend Donna's apartment to pregame with some other girls from the office. 2 of them were bringing their significant others, but Donna and I were flying as a pair of singles, if that makes sense. The party started with a happy hour at 7, and dinner was at 8 with an open top-shelf bar all night long. So we hung out having a few drinks at Donna's before Ubering to the restaurant, and the gang of us laughing and talking about work and our personal lives, too. It was starting out on a cool note. The merriment continued when we got to the place, and there were 2 other parties like ours going on in the same building. I was pacing myself as I didn't want to get too tipsy at a work function, and I wanted to see the new year in and then meet up with friends after midnight. So I allowed myself 1 drink per hour with a glass of water to even things out. The party was pretty fun, but when we sat down to dinner at tables of 8 people, one of our sales guys named Chip sat with us as there was only 1 seat left. He was married, but he was flying solo that night. Chip was a good-looking guy. He was in sales, but he bordered on being obnoxious and was an HR meeting waiting to happen. He was in his early 30s, and though he was married, he also had a habit of flirting with the younger women in the office, including me. Tonight, I was in his sights. He was pretty drunk already when we sat down and was talking way too loud and saying way too many off-color things. Honestly, some of it was funny, but after a while it got tedious the way he was trying to dominate the conversation. Halfway through dinner, he started to calm down, and that's when he turned his focus on me. At first, it was just general conversation, and I was okay with that. But every once in a while, he'd throw in a comment about my legs or the way I looked at work and tonight. Donna was on the other side of me and kept elbowing me, drunk as hell, also saying, "Chip's sweet on you, girl." And I kept telling her to shut up. When dessert came, Chip nonchalantly put his hand on my thigh and leaned over to whisper, "Are these thigh highs? I'd like to find out." I got really pissed inside. But outwardly, I just took his hand off my leg and whispered back, "Chip, cut this shit. I know you're drunk, but knock it off or I'm calling your wife." I didn't even stop to think why she wasn't at the party. He looked at me hard and just got up and then went to the bar. Donna asked what had just happened, and I said, "Don't worry about it." Around 10:30, I broke my rule of 1 drink per hour and had 3. This other new guy, Jeffrey, and I were talking, and he was also a little flirty, but he was also my age and single. Donna was still buzzing. Hell, everyone was. And my boss and the owner were handing out company awards and making all these crass jokes. It was back to being a fun time. A group of us girls left to use the ladies' room, and while we were there, got the idea to pop into one of the other parties going on. We did, and no one cared at all. It was another open bar and a bunch of strangers talking to us, and the night was starting to get crazy, but fun. At one point, someone grabbed my ass, and I thought it was Donna, and I told her to stop, and she said, "What are you talking about? That wasn't me." We burst out laughing and kept dancing. I went to the bar to get another drink, and then decided to go to the ladies' room, but this time by myself. I went in and was washing my hands when the door opened and closed. I didn't think twice about it, plus I was rolling pretty good at that point. So I just finished washing my hands, and when I looked up, there was a person standing behind me who quickly put an arm around mine and pressed into me. It was a guy wearing a surgical mask like the ones we all wore during COVID. And in my shock, I didn't say anything. I just kind of froze. I felt his hand grab the front of my dress and try to go lower, and then I yelled out. I don't even remember what, I just yelled. He said, "You know you want it. Stop acting like you don't." I looked at him through my drunken buzz and thought it was Jeffrey because all I noticed was his blue suit coat with the black lapels, and I screamed, "Jeffrey, get the fuck away from me." Just then there was a knock at the door and the guy let me go. He ran to the door and unlatched it, and I hadn't even realized there was a lock of any kind on it, and he burst past some women trying to get in. They yelled at him and came in to see me, standing there in shock, and one of them asked if I was okay and what had just happened. I said I didn't know, but I did know that some guy just came in and grabbed me. Two of them asked me what he looked like, and I just described Jeffrey because that's who it looked like to me. Donna came in and asked the same things and said we needed to get out of there and back to our party. I told her I thought Jeffrey just attacked me, and she said, "Wait, Jeffrey the timid? No way, Jenny." When we got back to the party, I immediately looked for Jeffrey and was going to let him have it. And there he was at the bar, without his jacket. Donna tried to stop me, but I went right over and grabbed his arm and yelled in front of everyone, "Who do you think you are, touching me, asshole?" Everyone stopped talking and looked at me. "What?" he asked. "What are you talking about?" I yelled in his face, "Just now in the bathroom, you fucking creep." He put his hands up and denied that it was him, and everyone with him said he hadn't left the bar in over an hour. Whoever it wasn't Jeffrey. Now I was embarrassed and looked like a total psycho bitch. Everyone kind of took a step back and looked at me, and I ran to our table and sat down on the verge of tears. Donna had stayed back and told them what had happened to me and then followed me over. She had 2 more drinks for us, and I sipped mine, telling her how shitty this night had turned. First, a married guy had been hitting on me, then some stranger grabbing me in the bathroom. After a while, Jeffrey came over and asked if I was all right and if he could sit down. I apologized and told him I had just seen the jacket like his, and he looked up at the table that he had been sitting at to see that his jacket was gone. He got up and went over to one of our VPs and said something, and the VP nodded and left our banquet room. He had gone to find security and tell them what had been happening. Donna asked if I wanted to go home, and now a very drunk Chip came over and kept saying, "You gotta stay! You gotta stay!" He was totally slurring his words. I calmed down after our VP came over and said he was sorry for what happened, and that the building security was on the lookout for the blue jacket guy. Jeffrey was really pissed that his coat was stolen. It was brand new. I stopped drinking with the intention of meeting friends right after midnight, and at 12:05 I was in another Uber with Donna headed to another bar. We got to the place and my friend Billy was the doorman who got us in past the long line of people still waiting to get in. We found my friends, and I was back to being in a good mood. But around 1 a.m., I swear I saw someone in the crowd wearing that blue jacket. I told Donna and my other girlfriends, and 2 of the guys who were with us had heard the story and went into the crowd to find the guy, but they came back after a bit without seeing him. I was thinking I was just paranoid at that point. We kept dancing, and I had a couple more drinks and was back to being tipsy. It was now around 2:30, and Donna said we should get going and I could crash at her apartment. We got into another Uber, laughing our heads off and now making fun of blue jackets. We got to her apartment and went in, and she crashed on her couch, and after using the bathroom, I crashed on her bed. Suddenly, there was a loud scuffle in the hallway outside, and we heard shouts and then a familiar voice say, "Hey, you just stabbed me, you little fucker." It was Chip. Then there were 2 loud booms on the wall and heavy breathing. Donna looked out the peephole and then opened the door. There stood Chip, with blood all over his jacket and a guy in a blue jacket lying motionless on the hallway floor. The doors in the hallway next door and across from Donna's opened, and people started coming out to see what the hell was going on. I dialed 911 and told them to send an ambulance, despite Chip saying he was fine. He wasn't really. He needed 13 stitches to close a wound on his side. Everything was a big ball of confusion, and the cops showing up made it even crazier. But here's what happened. The guy in the blue jacket was a mystery. He just crashed all 3 parties at the place we were at, spied me, and decided I was his choice for the night. Then he stole Jeffrey's jacket and assaulted me in the bathroom. He then laid low, dodging security, and then followed us to our next place where we met my non-work friends. And then he followed our Uber home. Somehow Chip had picked up on that and saw the guy when he was stumbling his way over to the other place where we were, For some reason, Chip had parked at the nightclub we ended up at for some reason, even though it was like a mile away. That's when he saw Blue Jacket Guy following us again, so he got into his car and then followed him home, who was following us in the Uber. Chip accosted the guy outside of Donna's place, and you know the rest. He was literally just some random guy, and I was in the wrong place at the right time, I guess. He had 2 knives on him and what the police called burglary tools. They figured he was going to try to break into Donna's apartment and assault us or rape us. No one said anything about Chip's little drunken drive over to save us. And I don't condone drunk driving at all, but Chip did literally save us. However, his wife gave him holy hell for it. I think she banned him from company parties after that. Anyway, they took the guy away when he came to. Chip had hit him pretty good a few times and slammed him into the hallway walls for good measure. That was the loud booms. I pressed charges from the restaurant encounter, and they stuck him with other things, including the stabbing, which was a much bigger deal. So the night finally ended with Donna and I walking to a diner to get coffee and breakfast. We slept the entire next day. Chip was going to be fine, and he swore off booze. He hasn't had a drop since that night. Last year, I skipped the company party, even though it was before Christmas. That one party they threw was enough for me for a lifetime. I now prefer to just stay home on New Year's with friends, and that's where I'll be this year. New Year's Eve Horror Story by Sarcastic Bitchy Wolf. This was incredibly terrifying and still gives me chills, as cliché as that sounds. I know some people hear these stories and say that they're 100% true for effect, but believe me when I say that this is 100% true. 3 of my friends and I were spending the night together on New Year's Eve about a year ago, and we decided we wanted to spend the night in a tent outside, really close to the woods. We were laughing and fucking around, normal teenage things. But then we heard this rustling outside in the leaves. Figuring it was just an animal or something, we shrugged it off. At that point, it was nearly midnight, and we had a flashlight in the tent, and we were blasting music. And that's when all hell broke loose. We heard this chirping noise outside. And when I say chirping, I don't mean it was like a bird or a raccoon. But it was this unearthly chirping that didn't sound like any animal at all. In fear that we were about to be ambushed, I demanded my friends temporarily turn off the lights and the music. At first they looked at me like I was crazy, but I strengthened my tone. Turn it all off, now. At that point they knew I was serious, so they turned it all off and listened. There it was again, this unearthly chirping that didn't sound like anything we knew. My friends and I were shitting bricks, but I was a little bit braver than the rest of them. I had been taking karate for about 4 years, and I'm a very tall female, capable of taking down a grown man. So I figured I could take whatever was out there. Or at least I could carry one of my friends if we had to run away. They all tried to play it cool and said it must have been one of those screamer fireworks things. But I could tell they were all shitting themselves. We carried on screwing around for a few more minutes, desperately trying to forget about the screech chirping thing outside. But then we heard it again, this time much closer to our tent. This was the first time I could properly hear it. And when it made a clearer sound, reality drop-kicked me in the stomach. It was fucking big, and it was almost right outside our tent. My friends and I were about to shit ourselves, so they started asking me questions as to what I thought it was. I was the friend who was into all things paranormal, and I still am. But I've never been a paranoid person, so they asked me. I told them I just had a suggestion that it could be a skinwalker or a fleshgate, because I read somewhere that they mock the voices of your friends, or emit noises that they think will lure out their victims. I only said this because I thought that could explain the screaming chirp thing. But I think they were really scared. We heard it again. And at that point, everyone was shitting bricks, and one of them eventually called her older brother to come and hang out with us for a while. Well, he was there, just our luck. We didn't hear the chirp screech thing anymore. Damn it. We hung out with her brother for a while until we all decided to go on a walk. The walk was fun, and my friends were terrified because we were walking around in the dark. But I've always liked the dark, and it was so vast and mysterious, it was just fun. I was also hoping we would find the flesh gate, so my friends would stop acting like stuck-up little shits that weren't scared, because I could see they were shitting themselves. I'm not going to lie, part of me was also terrified to see what would happen if we stumbled across a flesh gate. But her older brother had a knife with him, and I was prepared to stab if he wasn't. Fast forward later into the night, we were blasting music again and playing with a multicolored strobe light. Probably not the best way to avoid being jumped in the night, now that I think about it. My friend's brother had left us his knife in case we heard anything else that night. We all decided that I was the only one who would be brave enough to actually stab someone or something if it came to it, so I was in charge of holding the 6-inch knife all night. Thankfully, it was in a sheath because despite my training, I'm quite clumsy, especially late into the night. I couldn't help myself but taking the knife out of the sheath because it was so interesting and beautiful. And there it was again. The same fucking chirp screech. I unzipped the tent to look, knife drawn, and I heard something scurry away quickly into the woods. Since my friends didn't hear it, I left it alone. Everything was fine for the rest of the night, that is, until I was the only one awake. I heard this horrible scream howl, much more blood-curdling than the chirps. Much more blood-curdling than the chirps. It kept getting closer to the tent and then backing away like it somehow knew I was the only one awake. It circled us, made itself sound distant, and then come back with another howl. One of my friends briefly awoke and told me it was probably someone having a party, but I could tell she was just saying that so she could get the sleep she desperately needed. One time I went 3 days straight without having to sleep, so I was perfectly fine without it, unless I had a long day of school the next day or something. Believe me when I say I didn't let my guard down once. I listened to this thing and the location where the cries took place. I wasn't about to let some fucking flesh gate or whatever, some shit come in and kill my friends, and on a night that was supposed to be fun. I drew the knife a few times and practiced slashing the air in case it attacked. But it never did. That fucker just spent hours taunting me, trying to draw me out. I was incredibly tempted to run out there just to get a look at it, but I knew that was exactly what it wanted. Waiting for me to not be in a group so that I could pick the threat off, and then my friends. There was no way in hell I would let it anywhere near my friends. The older brother had left to go to a friend's house that night, as well as the friend we were all staying with. I lived with her grandma, no strong men around. I lived around the neighborhood, and both my mom and dad were home. My dad is a big guy standing at 6'2" and strong as hell, but getting his help would mean it would be way too far to run. I couldn't go out there to see what it was, even if I wanted to. Even though I am pretty damn fast, I was weak considering how late it was, and I would become this thing's prey. Knowing that, I just laid back, knife at the ready, listening in absolute horror. You don't know what true vulnerability is until you're on the outskirts of the woods in a tent with 3 lives in your hands while some paranormal creature is hunting you, teasing you, and you only have a close combat weapon that you're not even certain would put a scratch on it. I sat there in silence until around 6 in the morning, when I was certain that it had stopped. I couldn't take it anymore. The damn thing had driven me insane. My work there was done, as I was certain it was gone. I left the knife on my pillow and a note that said I had gone home and that I wasn't dead, just reassuring my friends when they woke up later on. I began to walk home to my house with the streets poorly illuminated by street lamps. There weren't that many to begin with, leaving a fuckton of dark spaces that I couldn't see even if I tried. To make matters 10 times worse, my glasses were smudged and I could barely see a fucking thing out of them. I knew it was better to my advantage if I kept them on, though, because I am blind as a bat without them. I scanned my surroundings my whole way there, keeping my eyes on every direction this thing could attack me from. The fucker was probably just waiting to get me alone anyway, but I wasn't going to let it do anything to me. When I finally got to my house, the door was unlocked, and to my relief, I could get in without my parents hearing me. Unfortunately, this was 5 in the morning, and as I mentioned before, clumsy as ever, I bumped into everything as I tried to navigate myself to my room where I forced myself to go to sleep. After that, when asked, my friends would say it was a screamer, firework, or some animal. But I could tell they were still scared and just trying to make sense of everything. I tried to make sense of it too, but I just couldn't. I knew what I had heard, and it was much worse than they could have imagined. They probably thought I mentioned fleshgates and skinwalkers just to scare them, but I truly believe it was one of the two. Nothing like this has ever happened to me again, but there's a reason that none of us have been sleeping outside in quite a while. New Year's and New Gym Scare, or Leave Your Johnson at Home, submitted by Travis. Pardon the title. If you use it, cool. I have to laugh at this situation, although it was anything but funny at the time. When I was in my mid-20s, my longtime girlfriend decided to cheat on me, so that ended that. I didn't even entertain her excuses. That shit was just low, and one thing I wouldn't put up with from anyone. I'm not Brad Pitt, but I'm not a fugly guy either. One night, she decided to give a server at a restaurant she was at with her friends a toss in the sack. Even her friends were pissed at her, and some tried to get me to reconsider. Even though we'd been together for 4 years and were talking about marriage and stuff, I saw that as nothing but bad shit to come down the line if we stayed together. This was right before the holidays that year, the beginning of November. After some drinks with my boys, I decided I needed to get back to the gym and start fresh with everything. I had been a D2 athlete, soccer if you want to know, when I was in college, and I wanted my six-pack back. I was not out of shape by any means, but I had been neglecting my old regimen. It was time to crank out workouts again, and the petty side of me also wanted to stick it in my ex's face. I checked out a bunch of gyms in my area, some that I was familiar with, but there were 2 newer ones I wasn't. I picked one that I liked that had a steam room and a sauna, and it wasn't too far from my apartment. It didn't take long to get back into the swing of early morning workouts before my job, and it didn't take long for me to meet Kim, either. Kim's not her real name. Kim was, well, call me a pig. Quite the specimen. 5'8", long blonde hair, built like a brick shithouse. I mean, well endowed, but in amazing physical shape, too. You couldn't not notice her when she was in the gym. What I did notice is that she was always there when I was, and usually doing similar stuff that I was. If it was cardio, she was around. Free weights, there was Kim. One day she asked me to spot her benching, and I said sure. We started talking and became friends. Gym friends, but friends nonetheless. After a week or so of talking during and after workouts, she asked if we could start training together, as she didn't have anyone else that went to the gym. She was super nice, and yeah, her cutoff shirts and tight spandex didn't hurt anything. I was thinking with my other brain, and I said sure. I was convinced she had a boyfriend or something, but just wanted to work out with me. We began to meet for workouts, and I learned she was 20 years old, 6 years younger than me. I didn't care. She had a great personality, and we had a lot in common, including recent breakups. After one workout, I asked her if she wanted to grab a salad or something sometime, and she smiled her amazing Susie toothpaste smile and said she wanted to just be friends. But if I was cool with that, then a meal together would be great. Our friendship went on, and I was getting my six-pack back slowly, and she was a huge reason for it. Kim kept me very motivated, but I could tell I was getting smitten by her, and she was with me. But we had kept it cool until she asked me to dinner on New Year's Eve that year. I said sure, and then she said, "At my place." She then leaned in to kiss me, and I kissed her back. She gave me her address and said 7 o'clock. It was Thursday, and we usually took Fridays off. New Year's was on Saturday night, and I thought if we couldn't make our Saturday workout, I thought if I played my cards right, I'd be getting a workout of another kind. So Saturday came. I went to her place, and it was a really nice apartment complex, and it dawned on me that I didn't know what she did for a living. At that moment, I didn't really care. She was hot, I was hot for her, and that was it. She invited me in, and she looked amazing. I mean, she was hot as balls at the gym, but she looked devastating that night. We had a glass of wine, and she made this great pasta dish. Then we had more wine, and then I had a couple of helpings of Kim. It was in that post-sex stupor of all is right with the world feeling when I got up to get a glass of water. I woke up a little faster, though, when my head was socked from the side into the wall right outside of her bedroom. My head exploded in pain, and I immediately felt another massive punch in my gut, and I doubled over. I went down on one knee, and from a distance heard Kim yell out, "What the hell are you doing here?" It sounded like she was at the bottom of a canyon. My eyes adjusted, and I saw a guy standing in front of me who said, "Who the fuck do you think you are touching my sister?" I slowly got out of my haze and saw this hand coming at me, and I dodged it. The punch missed me, but the guy's hand cracked off the frame of Kim's bedroom, and he gave off a yowl. I shifted to the side, dropped down, and brought my elbow into the back of his knee with all my weight on it, and he collapsed. This guy was a big dude, but not as in shape as me, but he was a mammoth of a guy. I kicked him in the face with all I had in my bare feet, and his head snapped back, and then it registered. His sister? What the fuck? Then I heard the sound of something metallic, and a voice say, "Don't you move, motherfucker." I looked up and saw a guy standing in the light of the hallway, pointing a gun at me. I froze. Kim was screaming stuff at her brother about how much of an asshole he was, and I was more than confused. Her brother just sat there holding his nose in his face. I did give him a good one. As I looked at him, I felt the barrel of the gun on the side of my head. "Get up slow, get your shit, and get back out here," said the voice. I looked at Kim, who was now standing in her doorway naked, and I thought how massively hot she looked right then. Like a total fucking idiot that I am. She was crying and saying over and over, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I just did what the voice told me to do and grabbed my stuff. The brother had gotten up, and the other guy was telling him to shut up and get out of the way. I mean, I had no idea what was going on. I took one last look at Kim and smiled at her. Tears were streaming down her face. I slowly walked down the hall with the guy pointing the gun at me, and he just said, "You were never here. You don't know any Kim. Go away and don't come back." It was like I was still swimming underwater. I looked one more time back to see Kim, but she had gone in her bedroom with her brother, and the guy said, "Leave now." I didn't argue and ran for my car like a scared kid. I drove home, ran into my apartment, and grabbed a beer. My head was throbbing, and I finally went into the bathroom to look at it. There was a huge goose egg near my temple. I got an ice pack, sat down, and tried to put everything together. I tried calling Kim, but it just rang and rang. Then I thought better of it when her machine picked up, and I didn't leave a message. I figured I'd let things cool down and see what was up with her if I saw her at the gym. She never came back to the gym. I never saw her again, and a week into the new year, her phone had been disconnected. Taking a chance, I drove by her apartment a couple of times at different parts of the day, but her car was never parked there. Kim just vanished, poof. To this day, I have no idea what happened to her, who she really was, or what I may have stumbled into. I wish there was some cool ending to this story like, well, it turns out she was in a mob family, or I finally found out that Kim was in the witness protection program, or Kim reached out to me on Facebook last month. But that's not the truth. The truth is, she left my life as quickly as she came into it. It's been many, many years since this all happened, and I'm happy to say that I'm not the scummy, objectifying asshat I was when I was younger. I met a nice girl, got married, and we have 5 kids, 2 of which are around the same age as when this happened to me. I don't often think of Kim, but your call for holiday stories brought all of it back. Wherever Kim may be, I hope her New Year's is better this year than the one we shared so long ago. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories, and Happy New Year to you wherever you are. I hope everyone has a safe holiday and starts 2024 off on the most positive note possible. Looking for great things to come on my channel and podcast in 2024, but I can't do it without you. I love getting your submissions. Please continue to send them to me. No matter what your story, as long as it's of a scary nature, remember, I read them all. Send what you've got to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and make sure that you hit the notification bell to make sure that you know every time I upload. And of course, listen to me on your favorite podcast platforms. Save some data costs for you. If you'd like to support the channel even further, please find my Patreon page. A link to that is in the description below, along with all of my social media links. And find my storefront on tpublic.com. Pick up some Uncle Josh Campfire Crew merch. Everyone, again, Happy New Year. My charge for you in 2024 is continue being excellent to each other. And to also be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.